Vario is easily one of my favorite micro brands, and that's simply because the owner, Ivan, is always coming up with new and interesting things. Whether you're looking at his Art Deco dress watch, a World War I trench watch, or a jumping hour Popeye, they're all a bit unique. He doesn't seem to be interested in making the same old diver that everyone else seems to be obsessed with. And now he's added this to the collection. It's the Vario Versa, a simple streamlined quartz dress watch with a bit of a twist. Flip the dial around and you got a second quartz watch in a slightly different style, making this an affordable dual-time alternative to both a tank and a reverso. Now, before we get going, I do want to point out that this watch is a reviewer sample. So it's been around a little bit and therefore it's not in pristine condition. However, this is also one I do get to keep, and that's why the promotional tag was up at the beginning. And one last thing, I should point out that these are all currently sold out. In fact, they didn't last that long, but new colorways are coming. So if you are interested, keep an eye on their website or sign up for their newsletter. With that out of the way, let's talk specs. As the Versa is a bit of a tank, you're going to look at a fairly narrow case of 25.5 millimeters, as well as a lug-to-lug of only 39. Which means that if you're looking for something smaller, sleek, and sexy, then this one should pique your interest. The two potential downsides, if you could even call them that, is that it has a total thickness of 12 millimeters and only 50 meters of water resistance. But considering this is a dress watch, 50 meters is plenty. And while 12 millimeters might be a little thick for a quartz watch, it is understandable when you realize you're getting two watches in one. Rounding everything out, it's also fairly lightweight at 65 grams, and it uses a standard 20mm strap. On my 7¼ inch wrist, it wears like you'd expect a watch of this size to wear. Its barely there footprint makes it extremely comfortable. Yet what is there has quite the presence. Part of the idea behind this thing is that one side is a bit dressy and the other's a little more casual. So, depending on what you're doing, you simply rotate the face around to whichever one works best. Or you can simply use one side to keep track of a second time zone. But I should point out that you can't really rotate this thing while wearing it. For that, you are going to have to take it off. But even with that, I think it's still a pretty versatile watch. On the surface, the case appears to be mostly brushed, with this double layer cake or stepping up effect leading to the dial. It's all pretty squarish, as you might expect it to be, except for the polished beveled edge that runs along the bottom layer, which adds some sleekness to the design as well as creates a highlight framing that upper layer, giving it a unique Art Deco-like style for a tank watch. Yet that is just the appearance of it, and there's a whole other functional aspect of this thing as well, as the lower section of the case is the frame that holds the dual watch setup, as there's a central pivot point allowing the whole thing to rotate, which then appears to be flanked by these tiny spring-loaded ball bearings securing it in place once it's rotated. You'll also notice that when each of the watch faces is rotated up, there is a crown at the top that allows you to set the time. And one thing I particularly appreciate is that even though the crowns are mostly hidden most of the time, Ivan still made sure that they're each signed with the Vario V. Because sometimes it's those small details that separate out great from good. Overall, it's a gorgeous design that creates an almost ideal balance between form and function. After all, it's a dual-time watch that looks like a simple, clean, sleek dress watch. There aren't too many of those around. It's got beauty and brains, so to speak. The only catch that I've found to this design is that it is a bit of a smudge factory, because there's nothing protecting the back face when it's on your wrist. It's in direct contact with your skin. Plus, it's pretty hard to rotate this thing around and not get fingerprints all over either crystal or the polished edge of the case. So if you're a bit OCD, just know that every time you rotate it, you're probably going to wind up wiping it down. And speaking of the dial, let's talk about it for a bit. Both dials are reported to be enamel, and the design is set up where one side is a little more elegant and the other is a little more casual. The original colorways, like this one, were set to be limited releases, so just know that the new ones that are going to be coming will be a little different. However, they should still have a similar feel. For this one, it starts off with this gorgeous Art Deco silver dial on one side and a simpler casual green dial on the other. The casual side is simpler and cleaner, with a white painted chapter ring, logo at the top, and a set of simple silver hands. Whereas when you rotate this thing around, that's where things get a lot more complex as well as elegant. With the other side having a sector style design that has two different finishes. The center is a polar white, and then the outer edges have this brushed silver effect, creating a fantastic two-tone effect that shifts with the light as you move around, all of which is then topped off with this beautiful set of blued hands, which really pop out onto that white intersection. Now, I can't stress this enough, but I absolutely love this side of the watch. I love the silver and white dial, and I love how it looks in this tank case. It's beautiful, and in some ways, this kind of leads to a problem for me with the Versa. The green side of the watch is still good, and I can see myself occasionally using it. But for me personally, I'd wind up wearing the silver side like 90-95% of the time. At which point, the whole rotating and flipping it around wouldn't be that useful for me. I like that silver dial 10 times more than the green. Although, that said, I could still see this being a great watch to take on vacation or like a cruise, as it gives you a lot of versatility. I mean, you are getting two watches in one, and you could even leave one side of the watch set for your home time. So it is an interesting proposition just from the functional standpoint. Now, the movements Vario chose to use are two Ronda SlimTechs 1062. Personally, I don't have any direct experience with these, but they are reportedly repairable Swiss quartz movements with 6 years of battery life. And 6 years is a good thing because I have no idea how to replace the battery on this one. And if Vario hasn't done this already, I'd highly suggest they create a video on how to do that, just to clear up the process for potential buyers. As for the straps, each one comes with one of Vario's vegetable tanned Italian leather straps, which is complete with a deployant clasp. In short, these straps are fantastic, and that really shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who's familiar with Vario. They're coming out with more and more watches, but they're still primarily a strap company. And from years of experience, I can tell you they have some great straps. So when it comes to straps, they know what they're doing. And the only potential problem I see is that if you have a larger wrist, like over 7.5 inches, this one may not do it for you. At 7.25, I'm on the second to last hole. So those with larger wrists, just be aware. And one thing I'd personally like to see is a standard buckle thrown in with this. Just for those that don't like the deployant clasp, this way it gives them an option. Now, this wouldn't be relative time if I just left one strap on the watch. So I did try a few others, most of which are from Vario. And in doing so, I realized another potential problem with this watch. And that's that finding the perfect strap for it can be a challenge, as you need to find a color that works with both dials. For instance, I absolutely love the white and silver dial on this red rally strap. Yet flip it around and it just looked Christmassy with the green. When it comes to price, MSRP here is about $428 US. And I know some are going to look at that and say that's way too much for a quartz watch. But remember, you're getting two quartz watches in one here. But even beyond the whole spec arguments, I gotta say the quality is here and nothing about this watch is standard. So I'm sure everything was done in small batches and is rather custom, and that doesn't come cheap. So as a whole, I think it's a pretty reasonable price. And in general, value is just kind of hard to evaluate with this one. There's not much else out there to compare it to. I mean, you could always compare this to Reverso, and at that point, this is a bargain. But realistically, that's not an apples to apples comparison. It's often said that art doesn't really need any purpose or justification, that art exists just for art's sake. At least that's what they say, and I'm not entirely sure that's always true, as one of the reasons I love watches is because it's where technology and artistry meet. Yes, it may be a piece of gear you strap to your wrist, but it's one where the design is just as important to it as its functionality. And I think the best watches in the world are ones that seem to find a harmony between those two sides. watches where form and function seem to find an ideal balance. Now, I'm not sure if the Versa is quite to that point, but I think it is close, and I'm not surprised at how quickly these all sold out. Vario has created a sleek and sexy tank watch, one that can be simple and clean or elegant and alluring, giving you possibly the best of both worlds, all with the added functionality of a dual time capability, making this potentially an ideal watch for someone who travels yet still wants to look good while doing it. I think Vario did an amazing job with this one, with the only possible issue being that it is a little tall for a dress watch. But I think for many, the idea of it, the uniqueness of it, and that added functionality more than make up for that. But anyway, that's the Vario Versa in a nutshell, and as always, let me know what you think about it down below. As well as what do you think about tank styles in general. Or if you want to guess what I'm wearing, you can put that down there too. Now as always, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm Shane, this is Relative Time, and I'll see you next time.